have Kalin on design system and consistent user experience. So with over 15 years of experience designing UI frameworks and products, since he joined over 7 years ago, he was in the forefront of the visual design. Thank you, Baid, for the Fiori design system. Recently, he moved to a lead role for defining the product design of SAP's business technology platform. So please, let's welcome Kalin.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for joining in. Thanks for taking the time to listen to me talking about consistent user experience. I hope you find it interesting, somewhat useful at the very least. So let me start by sharing my screen and we get this on the road. Just a second. Okay, I hope you see the slideshow. Okay. So consistency is a lot being talked about right now, right? It's we try to have consistent products. We have tried to have consistent experiences. We try to do the same things in the same way in many things, but mostly it's being used by this product is consistent. And the question we try to ask ourselves is consistent to what? What's the actual benchmark that we're trying to be consistent? And very often consistency means like sameness. Now, I want to explore this from two different perspectives. One is about consistency itself, and the other one is about the user experience. So let's start with the consistency. And when you have a product that you want to work on, and then you want to, or multiple products done by multiple teams, especially in a company as big as SAP, the consistency in its governance kind of comes natural. But there's always a but. When you talk about consistency and when I talk to other product designers within the company or my colleagues, there's always these kind of questions that start popping up. Like, I don't have the time to do this. We're on a tight schedule. That these rules that you've defined, they're not really relevant to me. Or my use case is a little bit different. And so didn't go this way. Or I did the user testing and it contradicts what you're saying here in this document that you said we should do this way, or any of the above. And there's often a misunderstanding of I don't get this. Why should I do this? Or I don't want to do this flat out, right? Now, we can always go back to the roots of where it's coming from, and then to quote the Jacob Nielsen, who's kind of a very prominent figure in the digital product design community, and he said it's one of the most powerful usability principles. When things always behave the same, users don't have to worry about what will happen, and that's kind of okay. It's about creating an expectation and meeting it. Like, go to your apartment and you see the lamp switch and you click it on, lamp goes on. It's a good experience, and it's consistently done through your house. At the same time, there are many, many, many switches now, different shapes, sizes, designs, behaviors. You can do it on your app, you can do it on your phone, and all of it breaks when the power goes down. So how do we bring this into products, and what does it really mean? And when we started investigating this, it's influenced, and how you build the consistency in the product, it's being pushed by both external and internal factors, and those could be in a digital environment, those could be your operating system. And for example, Windows or a Mac for that matter can imply certain consistencies on your software or your browser, or certain plugins that you have to run, or certain security limitations that you have to work. So you're framing, and as the previous presenter said, you're framing a box, and then you have to think within it and maybe out of it if you really can break the rules. And I'll show you how in the later parts. There are internal factors. Our company is designing in this way. We have this defined brand voice and tone that we have to follow. We have to be inclusive. We have a controlled vocabulary. So it's yet another set of limitations. And then there are additional external factors, which are not coming from the things that users do, but they're coming from your industry. Your industry is traditionally doing this way. It's accepted that certain amount of things needs to be handled in a certain way. It's the industry standard, as most say. And then the intersection of this becomes the smallest Venn diagram in the world. This is where you can be consistent. Those are the rules that you shouldn't really break. And a lot of the times, when it comes to software design, we have these design systems like your buttons and inputs and whatnot, that they say, okay, this is my design system, and now if I use it, I'm consistent. Well, that's not always the case. Usually, those are being pulled into these bigger kind of guidelines where you say, okay, these are the buttons, but you should use them in this particular way, right? And in the area that I'm involved in, which is the business technology platform of SAP, we actually have not one, but two systems. They're extension of the master, bigger Fiori SAP systems, but we have two of those that govern different aspects of those areas, trying to give guidance and to give options and to set a certain amount of rules of how to build your software, design your software. So they're both targeting both developers and designers and say, okay, this is what you need to do so that software across the board is consistent. But is it really? Now, if you take a look at that picture, some can see puzzle, other can see puzzle pieces, some will see shapes and colors, some will find a flaw in this that it doesn't really fit as a puzzle or something else. But if you talk about design and we talk about design system and we talk about achieving consistency, if you really break these pieces down, this is what I see. This is the design language of a puzzle. It has a square and it has this kind of semicircular, whatever shape. And then this is the building blocks. This is the language. And if you want to build a system out of that language that's defining these two things, you have to start creating rules. This is kind of like you start to have bringing limitation and constraints. You have to realize that these are two different shapes, right? One is a square. It's not a rectangle. It's not a triangle. It's a square. And the other one is this other shape. I don't know the name of it. Now, the next thing you're going to do is they have different sizes, but they also have relative sizes to each other. So you have to define that, yet another constraint. Then there's certain distance between them. They can be aligned differently. They can be separated apart. They can be pushed together. They can also interact. So they can intersect. And then what happens when that happens? And then just for flavor and for visual aesthetics, they can also have colors. And now you're defining this language and you're complicating it a little bit and you're starting to build this little bit of system and pieces and together. And at the end, when you combine all of it, you can define like this simple, very simple carrier of consistency. If you follow these 5 things, like you keep the shapes the same, you'll keep the interaction the same, you'll measure the sizes and the relation between sizes and distances, and you kind of choose, a certain color, then probably this will fit together, right? This will carry your product forward. This will make sure that whatever you design next, if you follow these rules, will be a piece that will click to this one. And it works and it scales and you can create different pieces, but then, and you can save some time and that's great, but then you have to create even more rules. Now, what would be the spacing in between these pieces? What would be the alignment of these pieces? And you're starting to impose constraints. And even then, you can make even further and you start assigning semantics to them and say, okay, blue pieces would be used for this and red pieces would be used for that. And yes, those are building bridges between silos because think about, let's say, a button, a red button that says cancel and a green button that says approve, or approve and reject rather. And then if you use them consistently, like the same way within your products, then people learning that red is bad and green is good will be okay moving from product to product. In that sense, they're building bridges between the products. They're also can create illusion of integration of those products, although that integration isn't there. And this is what we try to do, right? We try to create those pieces and we create this design system and we put it into components like component libraries, and we have several of them. And we define our buttons and their sizes and their shapes and their paddings and their text font sizes and whatnot. And we get something like this. Yeah, it's seemingly consistent. It's kind of looking the same. It's also a little bit gray. It's also a little bit bland, but it gets the job done and it's designing for consistency. And that's the first part. But designing for consistency is not really designing for people, right? It's designing for technically achieving something that would work. And then what happens if we start shifting the paradigm and say, okay, we have to work for user experience now. But user experience is about people, and people have different things. They have emotions, they have thoughts, they have feelings, they have desires. What do we do then? And then we can get back to this puzzle. And now we can say, okay, if we take consistency on all our products or all our puzzles, we'll need to have this green line and this purple piece in the top right corner. What do we do? And then what's the limitations of that? Well, sometimes, and very often actually, design systems are rigid. They're unable to evolve. You have certain things that are used in a certain way, and now it's propagated to certain products, and updating that is not easy. Or you cannot update all your products at the same time. Or you have other things to do, whether to do a design update or deliver a new feature, and then it becomes very, very tough. And that's the downside of using a design system, because you've built constraints upon constraints for yourself. So if you want to imagine a circular piece, it would not fit. Or if you want more spacing or a different alignment, it won't fit. And then if you're not allowed to break those rules, bend them somehow, get out of the box or recreate something, it really can suffocate creativity for both development and design. For design, it would be, I cannot do anything, I just have to do it this way. For development, it could be, well, we have this guideline and we have the standard component and we're not allowed to go out of the way. And then what ends up having is that you're not building the system for people. You're building it for delivery. You're building for your agile process to deliver a feature quickly. And yes, you deliver features quickly, but then your design becomes a little bit more homogeneous. It loses its soul, it loses its purpose, and then all of the products start looking like that. And that's our UI. The green part and the purple part should be the UI. That's the thing that needs to go invisible, because you're not working with your user interface. You're not working with your buttons. You're creating something in the middle of them. And then if you really think about the rest of the pieces, the colorful ones, that's the content. That's why people buy your product. That's your features. And at the end, digging deep into a design system and being stuck to it very narrowly, we're limiting our scope. And for a while, in my personal opinion, that was the case with Microsoft. It was not really associated as a design company, which is changing in the past years, and their products are getting better and better and more design flavored. And the example I want to give you of what I'm talking about consistency really and user experience, is coming out of them. And out of one of their three most popular products, that's Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. Now, unmistakably, you will never mistake these three products that are not part of the same family. They're vastly different. They do vastly different things, but you will never, ever say, this is not, the same thing. And this is not because they're completely consistent or hugely the same. This is because Microsoft has managed to achieve something that I try to dub as coherency. So they have elements that are the same, but they have elements that are different, but they're consistent in the ways that they're different. And that will make sense in a second. So think about this, for example. One is blue, one is green, one is orange, or kind of this, dark red color. This is their brand, the brand of these three products. Very different, don't need to be the same, but they're building on top of something and they're carrying the brand forward. If you think about something else, they give you context of what you're doing in completely the same way. Top in the middle with a bold text, and you know that this is a document, this is a book, this is a presentation. And if you give it a name, it will not say one book, one presentation, one will give it the name what it does. But then if you look at some other parts, their actions or their quick actions, they're different per product. There are actions that are the same, like the auto-save, the home button, the save icon, but then they're different. For example, there's no print in Excel. People probably don't print Excel tables all that much, or presentations for that matter, but they print documents. But in Excel, there's a button for Save As, and so on. And this continues throughout the entire UI. And there are other rules that you can identify. For example, if you look at the ribbon bar, it starts for something that's very generic and the same for all products, like home, insert, and draw. Move to something that's very product specific, like design, layout, reference, mailings for Word, and something similar or something specific for the other ones. And then at the end, they again move to some generic labeling for review and view, which are also common in between these three products. Now, the coherency part, and that's the thing I like the most, two of those have a design tab, the other one doesn't. But again, the design tab is placed consistently for the products that need it, and it's absolutely absent for the product that doesn't. And that's what makes this work. It repeats the same way if you look at the actions themselves. They start with a generic copy paste, font sizes, alignment, and such things, and move to specific things like styles for text or functions for Excel and other insert pictures and other mechanisms for PowerPoint. But then in the middle of it, if we just take the font alignments, they're not exactly the same in between three products. Probably nobody would mind that Excel has 3 lines of buttons as opposed to the other ones having 2. They have 3 because they need 3. And they're exposing vertical alignment because it makes sense for Excel and probably doesn't make a lot of sense for other ones. And that's not just that portion, it's the same for the footers as well. On the left, you have this kind of a status, which gives you this is one slide 1, or this is ready, meaning, if you have a function, it's completed and it's ready, or you have page 1. On the other side, you have layout options, which are completely the same, with a little bit of a variation. And again, it goes from generic to something that's specific for the product, like this blue section, and then it goes with the generic at the end, meaning what you most use or what is common in between them, you will find it at the same place. So you don't have to think about where was the zoom, because it's always in the bottom right corner. And then right next to it, contextually have these other actions that, yes, getting more experience with the product, you will learn that they're there and then you'll use it. And that's the UI part. That's the consistency part of it. And then what's really amazing is that the middle part where the content is, they're completely different. Granted, they have similar visual elements, similar effects, similar background colors, similar shadows, similar kind of line colors and thicknesses and so on. But in the middle of it, and if you remove the UI part, like the ribbon and the status, the footer at the end, those are 3 products that really have nothing in common. And you've all worked with them, they really behave nothing alike. But you will never ever say that these 3 products are not of the same family, that they're not kind of consistent or coherent, or applying knowledge from one will go to the other, works kind of the same way. Now, this is what makes them consistent. They're not the same. They're just pulling from the same DNA. They've established themselves certain principles that they follow, but they allow themselves to go outside of those principles. They've defined their problems, they drew their boxes, and they're going smartly outside of those boxes because their users need the save or the print icon there more than they need it in the other thing. And they've created a framework from themselves to be creative, to be specific, and to meet the user's needs. Meaning, you don't have to follow a pattern because some guideline said so. You can create your own pattern if that works best for your users. But when you create it, be mindful to bring these things, visual elements, design, visual design, placements of actions, or create a framework from yourself, that consistency that your brand or your product or whatever else dictates, you can bring it in. And with that, once you get the consistency kind of figured out, and you really start iterating on the user experience part, this is a pure exploration of mine of certain products, but this is pulling from the same, for a product rather. But this is pulling from the same DNA where you don't have to lose the soul of the product. You don't have to be gray on white because it's there. You can create within the boundaries or a little bit outside of it, and then you can really focus on the content part because that's what people use. When you go to Word, you type in your document. You're not busy with the bold and italic and whatever until you need them to, and then you're back to typing. And that's where the actual user experience happens, and that's where the click happens. That's where whatever you design and whatever expectation you create, and then it gets met, and that's what drives the user experience. So with that, I would like to thank you for listening and thank you for the time. That's my time. So if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.